Daniel's hands trembled as the deep hum of the Zorathian warship resonated beneath him. He had never imagined he'd end up here, on a foreign planet, captured by an alien queen, in the middle of a conflict that seemed as endless as the stars themselves. The young engineer had only come to space for the chance to work on new technologies, to explore and discover, but instead, he found himself caught in a war he didn't understand, surrounded by beings whose language was foreign, their motives even more so. When he had boarded the shuttle to accompany the diplomatic team to Zorath, he'd thought it was just another mission. The Zorathians were powerful, yes, but peaceful. At least that's what Earth's leaders had said. But one thing led to another, and before he could even get his bearings, war broke out. A rogue faction of the Zorathian people had attacked, and in the chaos, Daniel had been taken captive. His mission now? To survive. He wasn't the only human in the warship, but he was the only one who seemed to matter to their queen. Queen Valara was a towering figure, her beauty both commanding and terrifying. Her purple skin glowed softly under the dim lights of the ship, and her eyes, those eyes that seemed to look straight through him, were not just the eyes of a queen. They were the eyes of someone who had lived through battles and losses no human could comprehend. She had taken him as a prisoner. No, not just a prisoner. She had made it clear from the start that he was not to be treated like one. Instead, he had been shown to the finest quarters, allowed to eat the finest meals, and even granted privacy. But there was always a catch. She watched him closely, studied him as if he were something more than a human, something important. He still didn't understand why he was different. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even important to Earth's government, so why had the Queen taken such an interest in him? What could he possibly have that she would want? His questions remained unanswered. Every day, the same routines. He ate, he slept, he worked on small engineering projects in the hopes that his skills would keep him alive. There was no escape, no way to go home. He had tried once only to be met with stern looks and the cold hand of the Queen's guards. It was during one of those long, lonely nights that the unthinkable happened. He had been working on a small piece of equipment when the door to his quarters opened. The figure standing in the doorway was unmistakable. Queen Valara. She had come to see him again. But this time, there was something different in her eyes.
"You've been keeping yourself busy, Daniel," she said in a voice that was calm yet full of power. "But you've hardly said a word to me."
"Don't you want to know why you're here?" Daniel stood up, brushing off his hands as he faced her. The Queen was intimidating. There was no way around that. Her presence filled the room, making him feel small despite his height. But despite the fear that tried to grip him, he pushed it away. "I don't know why I'm here. You don't have to keep me locked up. If you need something, I'll help." The Queen stepped forward, her footsteps quiet but purposeful.
"Oh, you're not just here to help. You're here because of something far more significant. You see, Daniel, you've been chosen for something greater than you can imagine."
Daniel blinked, confused.
"What do you mean, chosen for what?"
The Queen's lips curled into a small, mysterious smile. "You'll find out soon enough. But for now, you must stay. And I must keep an eye on you." He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. Something about the way she spoke, so calmly, so assuredly, left him speechless. There was no arguing with her. No one argued with Queen Valara. Days passed, and Daniel's thoughts were a whirlwind. He had no idea what was happening, but the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger with each passing hour. And then, one day, it happened. It was a quiet morning when he felt it. Something was off. The ship was still. Unusually so. There was no hum of engines, no bustle of crew members running to and fro. He stood up from his seat and walked toward the observation window. Outside, the stars were still, but there was a presence in the air, a tension that wasn't there before. Then the door to his quarters opened once more. This time, there was no regal greeting, no formalities. Valara stepped inside, her face pale, her expression hard.
"Something has happened," she said, her voice tight. "We were caught in an anomaly."
And the results. She trailed off for a moment, and Daniel noticed that her hands were shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it. "What happened?" he asked, the fear he had been holding back creeping into his voice. The Queen turned toward him, her eyes locking onto his. "You've changed something in me, Daniel, and now I'm not sure how to deal with it." She stepped closer, and for the first time, Daniel saw the vulnerability beneath the surface. The Queen wasn't invincible. She wasn't untouchable. She was just a woman, caught in the midst of a galaxy she didn't fully understand.
"What do you mean?" Daniel asked, his voice quieter now. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, the words heavy with unspoken meaning.
Daniel blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What?" Valara stood still, her gaze unwavering. "I am carrying a child, Daniel, and that child is yours." Daniel stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the words the Queen had just spoken. Pregnant? He blinked, trying to make sense of it. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected any of it, to be honest. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Valare's gaze held him, unwavering. Her purple skin seemed even more radiant under the soft glow of the lights, her sharp features accentuated by the tension that filled the air between them. She wasn't angry, nor was she scared, but there was something heavy in her expression, a kind of vulnerability he hadn't seen before. It was as if she, too, was struggling to make sense of this unexpected situation. "I don't understand," Daniel finally managed to say, his voice hoarse.
"How could this happen? I thought
our species couldn't... I know."
Valara interrupted, her voice calm yet tinged with a note of frustration.
"I didn't expect it either."
The Zorathians and humans, our biology, our very essence, shouldn't mix. But something has happened. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but it has. And now, I have to deal with it. She turned away slightly, her eyes narrowing as if she was weighing her next words carefully. "I know you're probably scared, Daniel," she said quietly, her voice softer now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But I need to understand this, and I need to know if you'll be here with me to figure it out." Daniel was still processing the shock, trying to piece together the reality of the situation. He had been trapped in this strange place for so long, taken by a queen he never thought he would ever meet, much less form any kind of relationship with. Now, not only was he trapped, but he was responsible for something that defied the very nature of both their species.
"Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would it be me, of all people?"
Valara turned back toward him, her eyes locking onto his. For a brief moment, he saw something in them, a flicker of uncertainty. It was the same look she had when they first met, when she had captured him and treated him like an object of curiosity. It was the same look that told him she didn't have all the answers. "I don't know," she admitted, her tone tinged with an honesty that Daniel hadn't expected. "But I can't ignore it, Daniel. I can't pretend it didn't happen. And now, I need your help." Daniel took a step back, his mind racing. Help? What could he possibly do to help her? He was just a human engineer, a small cog in a massive machine of intergalactic politics and warfare. But this was something entirely different. "I'm not sure how to help you," he said slowly, his voice low. I don't even know how I'm supposed to deal with this myself." Valara studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing. "Neither do I," she said.
But I need to know you're not going to run from this, Daniel. I need to know that you'll stand by me, even if we don't have all the answers.
Daniel looked down, thinking about everything that had happened so far. The battles, the lies, the confusion. His life had been turned upside down since he first came into contact with the Zorathian Empire, but now, with Valara's confession, it felt like everything was changing again. He had always thought of himself as just a small part of a much larger story, but now he was part of something he couldn't escape.
I didn't ask for this, he said quietly,
almost to himself.
I didn't ask for it either,
Valara responded, her voice soft. But sometimes life doesn't ask for permission. They stood in silence for a long while, each lost in their own thoughts, until Daniel broke the silence again.
I want to help you,
he said, his voice steady now.
I don't know what that means yet, but I'll do what I can. We'll figure this out, together.
Valara's lips curled into a faint smile, and for the first time, she looked genuinely relieved.
Thank you, Daniel.
That means more than you know. In the following days, their relationship shifted.
No longer was Daniel simply a captive, held for reasons he couldn't understand. Now, he was something else. A partner, though neither of them knew exactly what that meant. Valara's decision to keep the child had far-reaching consequences, not only for her, but for the entire Zorathian Empire. Her advisors, her allies, and even her enemies were already beginning to whisper about the human child. If they found out the truth, that Daniel was the father, it could destroy her reign. But Valara wasn't afraid. She had ruled with strength and cunning, never backing down from a challenge, and she wasn't about to start now, even if that challenge came from within her own heart. As the days passed, Daniel found himself spending more and more time with Valara, helping her understand the science behind what had happened. They began to talk more about the strange cosmic event, about the biology of both their species, and about their own fears and hopes. There were moments of tension, moments when both of them had to confront their own biases and doubts. But there were also moments of understanding, small but significant. During one of these conversations, Valara spoke again of the consequences, her voice more serious than it had been before.
The Zorathian Empire is built on laws, Daniel, she said, her tone more regal now.
Laws that say this child, our child, cannot exist. A hybrid of human and Zorathian blood. It's unheard of. It could shake the very foundations of everything we've built. If the council finds out, they will demand I abdicate. And if they find out about you? She stopped, her words trailing off. Daniel felt a cold shiver run down his spine at the thought. He had seen the way Valara's enemies looked at her when she made decisions they didn't agree with. They were always quick to undermine her, quick to strike at her weaknesses. And this could be her greatest weakness yet.
What do we do?
Daniel asked, his voice low. Valara turned her gaze to him, her eyes hard but determined. We keep this secret for now. We protect the child until it's safe, until I can figure out what it means for both of us. But know this, Daniel, if anyone finds out, we will have to fight. For our child. For the future. Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since he was captured, he felt like he had a purpose. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel's role in the Queen's life grew. No longer just a captive or a pawn in a galactic war. He became something more. With every passing moment, the bond between him and Valara deepened, not just out of necessity, but because in some strange way, they needed each other. The Zorathian Empire had always been a place of order, of rigid rules and expectations, but now it was becoming a place of uncertainty, and Daniel and Valara stood at the center of it all, caught between the old ways and the new, struggling to figure out what kind of future they could create together. But the quiet whispers of the Empire were growing louder, and soon the truth would come to light. When it did, they would be forced to confront the full weight of their choices, and nothing would ever be the same again. Weeks passed, and Daniel could feel the tension growing around him. The walls of his quarters, once a familiar place of solitude, now felt confining. He had grown accustomed to the routine, morning meetings with the Queen, quiet conversations with Valara about the mysteries of their situation, and endless questions about what the future held. But no matter how much they tried to reassure themselves, the reality of their situation hung over them like a shadow. The Zorathian Empire, vast and ancient, had never known weakness. Its leaders, its warriors, its laws, everything was built on strength and control, and yet the presence of an unborn child, one that defied the very biology of both humans and Zorathians, threatened to unravel it all. Daniel knew this, Valara knew this, and even if they didn't speak about it every day, it loomed in their conversations like a dark cloud. Valara was determined to protect the child, and she had made it clear that she would not let anyone, not even the council, decide its fate. She had built her empire on her own terms, and this she would handle the same way. But Daniel could see the strain in her eyes. She was strong, yes, but she was also alone in this. Alone in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. There were whispers in the halls, quiet rumors that spoke of the strange bond between the Queen and the human, the impossible child growing within her. The court was divided. Some were loyal to Valara, some were not. But all of them knew that if the truth came to light, the very foundation of the empire could crumble. One evening, Valara called for Daniel to meet her in the royal chambers. He walked through the familiar halls, but tonight, something felt different. The usual guards were absent, and the air was thick with a sense of anticipation. As he reached the door to her private chambers, he hesitated for a moment. What did she need to discuss now? He entered without knocking, as was customary in Zorathian culture, and found Valara standing by the large observation window, staring out at the stars. The light from the distant suns bathed her in a soft glow, casting shadows on her face. She looked more regal than ever, but there was something fragile in her posture, something that reminded him that she, too, was human, just like him.
"You wanted to see me?" Daniel asked quietly. Valara turned to face him, her eyes dark with concern.
"The council has requested an audience with me tomorrow," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of tension. "They know something is wrong."
"I can't hide this much longer, Daniel. They'll demand answers."
Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. The council. The very people who had helped shape the empire, the ones who kept everything in check, would never allow this to stand. They would see the child as a threat, and they would see him as a weakness. The human would be blamed for everything, just as much as the Queen. "What do you think they'll do?" he asked, stepping closer.
"I don't know,"
Valara admitted, her gaze shifting to the stars again.
"But I won't give up my child. I won't let them take it from me."
The Queen's voice was firm, but Daniel could hear the uncertainty beneath it. She was scared. Scared not just for herself, but for the life growing inside her. He could understand that fear. He had never imagined his life would come to this. He had never imagined being the father of an alien child, of standing alongside a queen in a political system so far removed from anything he'd known. And yet, here he was.
"We'll face them together,"
Daniel said, his voice steady. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll be by your side." Valara looked at him, and for a moment, their eyes locked.
It was a simple promise, but one that meant everything.
In that moment, Daniel knew that despite the vast differences between them, human and Zorathian, prisoner and queen, there was something undeniable between them. A bond that neither of them had chosen, but one that neither of them could ignore. The next day, the atmosphere in the royal court was charged with a palpable tension. The council had gathered in their great hall, their seats arranged in a semicircle around the raised platform where Valara stood. Her presence as commanding as ever. Daniel stood beside her, watching the faces of the counselors carefully. They were all seasoned diplomats and warriors, each with their own agenda. They had seen things, done things that Daniel could only imagine. But today they would face something they had never encountered before. The eldest counselor, a tall, wiry figure with silver hair and a sharp gaze, stood and addressed Valara directly. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice laced with formal respect. "We have received reports of your condition. The council is concerned. It is unlike anything we have ever witnessed. We must discuss this matter immediately." Valara's eyes narrowed, but she remained composed. "I am well aware of your concerns, Counselor," she replied evenly. "But this is my matter to handle. My child will not be a subject of debate." The counselor paused, his gaze flicking to the others in the room. There was a murmur of agreement from some, and a few uneasy glances exchanged between others. It was clear that not all of them shared the same conviction. Valara was the queen, but the council held power too, and they weren't used to having their authority challenged. "You must understand, Your Majesty," the counselor continued, "that this child could bring about unforeseen consequences."
The balance of the empire is fragile. The laws of our people are sacred.
This hybrid, this human child, could destabilize everything we have worked for. "The laws of our people are what got us into this war in the first place," she said, her voice cold. "I will not be dictated to by fear of the unknown. This child is my future, and it is the future of the Empire. You may question me, but I will not yield."
There was a long silence as the counselors processed her words. Daniel stood silently at her side, watching the exchange with a growing sense of dread.
He knew what they wanted. They wanted her to abdicate. They wanted her to step down, to allow someone more suitable to take her place, and they would do anything to achieve that. The eldest counselor spoke again, his tone more measured this time. "You are the queen, Valara, but even queens must answer to the people. If you are not willing to give up this child, then we may have no choice but to act. The future of the Empire cannot be left to chance." Valara stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. "The future of the Empire is not yours to decide," she said, her voice ringing out in the chamber. "I will not be a puppet in your game of politics. My child will have a future, and if you try to take that away from me, you will regret it." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear they were not prepared for such defiance. They had expected to intimidate her, to pressure her into compliance, but Valara wasn't backing down. Not this time. "I will protect my child at all costs," she said firmly, her gaze sweeping across the room. "And I will not let any of you take that from me." The counselors seemed to sense the shift in power, the quiet understanding that Valara had made her decision, and that no amount of political maneuvering would change her mind. They had underestimated her, just as they had done countless times before. And Daniel? He had never felt more certain of his place in this galaxy. Despite the fear, despite the unknowns, he would stand by Valara. He would help her protect this child, even if it meant facing the full wrath of the Empire. As the council adjourned, the whispers began anew, but Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He had made his decision. And no matter what came next, he would face it with Valara. Together. The days after the council meeting felt like a whirlwind, each one blending into the next with increasing urgency. Valara had made her position clear to the council, and Daniel could see that the response had shaken them. No one had expected the queen to stand so firmly in her decision. Her defiance wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was a declaration that the future of the Empire, of everything she had worked for, would not be dictated by fear or tradition. Still, the political fallout was far from over. Daniel could feel the eyes of the Empire on him, even though he tried to stay out of the limelight. Whispers followed him wherever he went. The human who had caused the rift. The man who had sown chaos in the very heart of the Zorathian Empire. He kept his head down, focusing on the small tasks at hand, helping Valara with the royal tech, designing new systems to enhance the defenses of her fleet, and even tinkering with devices to monitor the child's development. They both knew that the child's existence had consequences far beyond what they could imagine, but they refused to let that fact tear them apart. Valara, on the other hand, had become even more resolute. She spent hours in the royal archives, researching every ancient law, every historical record, every piece of knowledge that might help her understand how to navigate the political and cultural maelstrom she had stirred up. But even as she worked, the weight of her decision seemed to press down on her more each day. One evening, after a particularly long day spent in the archives, Valara summoned Daniel to her chambers. Her voice crackled with exhaustion, but also with something else: determination.
"Come in!" she called from within the room. Daniel stepped inside, his eyes scanning the familiar space, and found her standing by the observation window, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked out at the stars, her expression unreadable. "You wanted to see me?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle but curious. Valara turned to face him, her gaze unwavering.
"The council will call for another meeting soon."
"I can feel it. They won't let me ignore them for much longer. They want me to give in, to step aside, to allow the proper rulers to take charge. They think this child is a symbol of weakness, and they're right about one thing. If I give up now, it will break everything." Daniel stepped closer, his heart pounding. He had always known that their relationship, however it had started, wouldn't be easy. But now, with the entire empire watching them, it felt more dangerous than ever. The stakes had never been so high. "I don't know what the right answer is, Valara," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But I do know that if we give up now, if we let them dictate our future, we'll be giving up everything we've fought for. You won't just lose your throne, you'll lose everything you've worked to build." Valara looked at him, her eyes softening for the briefest moment.
"I know.
And I But I'm not the only one at risk here. You are too.
If the council discovers the truth, they won't hesitate to punish you for being part of this."
Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The thought of being used as a pawn, a scapegoat in their political games, unsettled him. But even more unsettling was the realization that he didn't care. He cared about the child, about the future they could create together, and he cared about Valara. "I'm not afraid," Daniel said firmly, his voice unwavering.
"I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of what they might do. What I'm afraid of is losing you, losing everything we could be. We're in this together. We'll face whatever comes. I'll stand by you."
Valara's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of warmth in her eyes. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm.
"You're right," she whispered. "We're in this together." For a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear.
There was only the two of them standing in that small room, sharing a quiet moment of connection amidst the chaos that surrounded them. In that brief instant, everything felt possible: the weight of the empire, the pressure of the council, the uncertainty of the future. They all seemed to fade away. But as quickly as the moment had come, it passed. The soft hum of the ship's engines reminded them both of the world they lived in, the world they couldn't escape. Valara's expression hardened once more, the weight of her responsibilities returning.
"I won't let them take this child from me," she said, her voice resolute. "We'll fight together. I won't back down."
Daniel nodded, his heart swelling with determination. "Then let's make sure we're ready for what comes next." The following days were filled with preparations. Valara called in allies from across the empire, those who had once been loyal to her, those who had been on the fence, and even those who had once opposed her. She knew that if she was to keep her throne, if she was to keep her child, she would need the support of every single one of them. And as the council meeting drew near, Daniel found himself thrust into the heart of the action. The stakes were high. They both knew that. But what neither of them had anticipated was the sudden shift in the political winds. An unexpected ally, a powerful warlord from a distant Zorathian sector, made a surprise appearance. He had come to offer his support to Valara's cause, bringing with him not only military strength, but a crucial piece of information that would change everything. The warlord, a burly figure with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority, met with Valara and Daniel in the royal chambers. His voice was deep, his words carefully measured. "I've heard the rumors," he said, his gaze flicking to Daniel. "The rumors about the child, about your bond with the Queen, and I've seen the way the Council reacts to that. But there's more going on here than just your child, Valara."
There are others within the Council. Those who want to use your situation for their own gain. They see you as weak because of this child, but they don't realize that the child might just be the key to their downfall.
"What do you mean?" The warlord's gaze turned to Daniel. "What if I told you that your child could be the key to uniting the fractured factions of the Empire? What if this child, half human, half Zorathian, could serve as a symbol of the new order? The Empire's future doesn't lie in the hands of the Council, Valara. It lies in the hands of the people. And they'll follow you, if you're willing to take the risk." Daniel could see the shift in Valara's expression as the warlord spoke. The idea was radical, but it was exactly what they needed. If the child could unite the fractured empire, if it could bridge the gap between humans and Zorathians, it might be the solution they were looking for. But it came with a price. Valara turned to Daniel, her eyes searching his. "This is it. This is our chance. But if we do this, there's no turning back. It could change everything." Daniel met her gaze, his heart racing. There was no turning back now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady. "We'll face it all." The next day, Valara stood before the Council once again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had the support of her allies, of the warlord, and of Daniel. And when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "I will not be dictated to," she declared. "I will not let this empire fall because of fear. My child will not be a symbol of weakness. It will be a symbol of our strength, our future. And if you cannot accept that, then you will have to face the consequences." The room was silent. The councilors exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. They had expected submission, not defiance. They had expected her to bow to the weight of tradition, not challenge it. But Valara stood tall, unwavering, and in that moment, Daniel knew that whatever happened next, they would fight for their future. For the child, for the Empire, and for the chance to build something new, together.